Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. Today I am joined by myself. Sadly, Josh wasn't able to make it. He was whisked away to a surprise birthday party for himself. And sadly, it was all so sudden, I wasn't able to steal some notes of Josh. So after this episode, I'm going to get my hands and knees and I'm going to beg Josh sends me some notes when it's possible about his thoughts and feelings on Odyssey, and I'll link them on our Twitter for you all to enjoy and comment away. So this is episode 11 of our 11-week deep dive series, and it is the final one in this main series. So next week there'll be a new project, which is going to be a surprise, and the project after that you guys will decide. So please shoot us a link of what you want us to do, what you want to hear, and we'll see how we can work it, but I'm pretty confident we can do it. So this week is Odyssey, and I've been frantically rushing around speaking to all my good friends in the ones who came of our Discord server. There are brilliant members and off Twitter, and we got some lovely insight into the game that we're just going to read off and give a little interpretation. So I will give a score of 5 at the end, and on Twitter when I get the chance, Josh will also give a score out of 5, and then they'll give a joint total of out of 10 from what you've been seeing normally in the deep dive. So let's just kick off with my thoughts and feelings on Odyssey. Now, my thoughts and feelings on Odyssey is really risque to say because of how it is the most most divided game in the AC history. Some fans love it, some fans hate it, some fans think it's okay. Now, for me, I stand by the fact of its core story and lore impacts are fantastic. If you read the Odyssey novel with Cassandra the protagonist, you do see that there was this fantastic storyline. The Isu lore did fit in with the time period so well because the Greeks were known to have this whole elusive to fantasy. Everything they did in the culture was to the gods, and to see that played out with the Isu was kinda nice, but sadly the execution in the core gameplay wasn't always there. So to me it's an outstanding idea and story, but execution could have been better. Now, I played this game from launch and I played it, I enjoyed it, but it lacked that life. Origins had this life to it. Every bustling town and city felt alive and breathing, but Odyssey didn't have that at times. You spent a lot of times on a boat that just felt forced because everywhere you went was just combat, combat, combat. You couldn't sail from one edge to the map to the other without combat, and it did become monotonous and repetitive. But at the same time, it did help flesh out, because if there was no combat, I'm not going to be rude, but sailing from Kefalonia to the other side of the map would have been pretty boring. But maybe too much times it did get a bit monotonous, all these boats just ramming you at once. The story didn't really flow that well because for me I didn't find the issue because I'm a very side quest hunty person, but I have heard that with how the level gating worked, some people didn't get the flow of the story because they spent more time grinding for levels to get to the next area to push forward. The story fell to the wayside. And now this is sad because the game did have a really strong storyline. It was this nice story about Cassandra abandoned, finding retribution, realizing she's more than meets the eye, and then suddenly she's now this, in her eyes, a deity, a demigod, as I would put it in Greek legend. We all know she's not a demigod, she's just a Mystios, which could be a demigod, but that's more of a fanatical podcast about fantasy that I have not set up yet. So the combat wise, I'm a bit iffy on. People call it floaty, but I don't feel it floaty. But I do feel it is a really heavy concentration on button mashing, timing with skills. Pretty early on, I did get a gist of how the gear system worked. I was able to make a stealth build that pretty much allowed me to clear camps out over fighting, so I didn't get a lot of the meaty combat because I was spending more time sneaking into camps and one-shotting a lot of people I could. But I can see where, compared to the Origins, where you did feel the combat, you felt like you needed to dodge, you weren't relying on your abilities, because there was no strong abilities. It was that overcharge attack, but it didn't feel like something you had to rely on. Whereas in Odyssey, combat always felt a juggle between Second Wind, Bull Rush, the Vanish ability, Hero Strike, Poison Blades. It's just somebody in one of these comments, I can't remember because my notes are spinning around, called it an MMO style gameplay. And I can see how it feels MMO from the way the lore quests work, the side quests work, how they're all jumbled up and it's kind of hard to find. But it's kind of hard to keep pushing down Odyssey for all its faults, because the world did look stunning, and Cassandra herself and the character model was a good built up. There was great animations, the voice acting was fantastic. I do know we have Alexios as a second character, and I did do a tweet, and it looks like a lot more people did play Cass over Alexios. Now I chose Cass for a lore perspective because it felt nice to do more of a lore playthrough, and I can't have any complaints. Cass felt very into the game, her emotions played off. Spoiler warning, when Phoebe was killed, you did get the sense of the pain and upset she felt. I think the only negative I can actually say isn't on the actor, is on the dialogue, because sometimes you've got this raw emotion from it that felt great, especially in the ending speech with Layla. You did get the urgency that once this all is over, they need to be destroyed, and you can feel the urgency in her voice. But when you go to a choice, it just falls flat. And I think that's just trying to incorporate something that's new to the series, but as Visions of the Past alluded to in the last episode, which great friend of mine, check out the tweet I retweeted. Apparently Layla's animus is designed to break the code, which is mainly like, imagine the Matrix. Layla is Neo from the Matrix. She can break the code, and she can make the simulation of the animus expansive. So you play in memory, but you create simulations probably based off historical text to how she could have said something. It doesn't change history, it changes what she could have said or what she could have done, which is something we have seen since Assassin's Creed 1 till now, where you kill guards, but they didn't kill guards in history for no reason. That's a player's choice, and that's the simulation changing. So I think there's still some new lore aspects that are trying to wiggle around, and I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it's the right time in the series to throw new lore in and expand. But again, I fly all the way full circle. Execution wasn't there. They could have explained how they were doing this. They could have given us a reason, but sometimes that lacked it. And the dialogue could have worked, but sometimes the dialogue felt flat. And that's just Odyssey's problem in a nutshell. An outstanding story and lore set piece bundled together with a not so good execution system and gameplay mechanics. So let's dive into what we've got on Twitter and from the Discord server. So Mr. Made of Bones, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, buddy, but Odyssey's progression system is almost one out of an MMO. The world had a lot of copy-pasted locations, the question marks felt old, quick, the story wasn't that interesting and felt lacking, combat was meh due to the damage sponges enemies, good parts of the game when the cities and certain plot points were interesting. The mythological monsters were cool, boss fights, Atlantis DLC was also pretty nice even though the main game problems still present. I won't touch on the Legacy DLC, and I'm not going to touch on the DLC too much either, but it was nice to see that the mythical side, as he pointed, wasn't just some shoehorned, here's some fantasy, go enjoy. It was explained as an ESO experiment gone wrong, and this is going to be touched again in a minute from a really cool sounding name, I'll tell you in a minute. And I felt that nice how it was able to incorporate history and fiction and actually make something semi-believable. Is Medusa historically accurate? Yes, on the count that a lot of legends were based on real stories. Could she turn people to stone? Probably not. Did she have snakes for hair? Probably not. Was the idea behind Medusa real? Maybe. And I think that's how a lot of Greek legends started, and a real event or person just exaggerated into the greatest storyteller in history. And it was nice to see they took that and added their own ESO spin on it, and it worked, even though I was a bit, and I still am now, a bit iffy on it because sometimes it just felt bland. The Minotaur was fun, Medusa was kinda good, I wasn't so keen on the Cyclops, the Sphinx one was just too easy. I know you're supposed to solve riddles for the Sphinx, but the riddles didn't feel challenging. You could just pause the game and Google it. It just didn't feel like there was a reason to do it, which is sad because it was a really annoyingly long side quest to get to it, just for a really flat event. So the next bit of information we have from the real Malakas. Really love this guy's name. Regular Old Malakas. He's going to tell me off for that one. Regular Old Malakas is a great friend of mine, and he has put. My notes have gone vanishing again. Sorry about this. Odyssey's map is amazingly huge, cool to explore, but overwhelming at times. Odyssey does not feel a lot like old AC. While Origins had similar gameplay, the cities were as dense as older games and there was too much nature. You couldn't even stay in Haystack after landing in it. No social stealth again, though Odyssey had the perfect opportunity to add in some classic formula since we have heteries. Sorry, I apologise, I'm not very good at reading at times. Choices were nice, but didn't have exactly much meaning or change to the lore, so I'm not the biggest fan of the dialogue. But he does like the setting. Classic Greece is one of his favourite historical settings on the AC. Odyssey portrayal of it was shockingly accurate. Love meeting with OG historical figures such as Socrates, Hercules and such. Especially talking with them at the symposium, hella fun. Odyssey had a touching story about family reunion, which I liked and related to. The game really follows in the footsteps of Homer's Odyssey, and I love how you perfectly blended Greek mythology of AC lore. The monsters were failed experiments of Project Olympus. Atia and Juno experimented on humans. All of that juicy lore is just really satisfying, and I'm not done. Haven't even talked about my favourite part of the game yet, Cassandra and Icaros. Icaros is just the most adorable bird I've ever seen, got a huge crush on him. He's as loyal as Senu girl, but he can attack your enemies. That bird is amazing. Zona, the legendary eagle bearer, is pure badass. Cass is a sassy Mystios who always gets the job done. She's also one of the first proto-assassins out there and only being capable of wielding the staff of Hermes without being corrupted. I love how even with all the dialogue choices, Cassandra has a fixed personality that you can't change. She is not a mere vessel of player, but her own well-written character. And now, he has touched on some good points, but I do feel a bit mixed on his response to Cassandra. I do agree she had this great emotion and feeling to her, that it was well-rounded, but I do feel that maybe it's how I perceive the dialogue choices. When you hit these dialogue choices, her personality seems to drop off. She has great voice acting for them, and she does really well to deliver the lines. But to me, because there's no impact on the choices at times, they did feel a bit flat and a bit meh. I think the biggest one had to have been for me was back at the start of Catalonia. You meet some of Phoebe's friends. They're all dying from a sickness, and you got the choice to save the family or let them die. I did both. I saved and restarted, and her emotion for both of them felt the same. And there's meant to be this big Phoebe was never going to talk to you again impact, but Phoebe does talk to you again later on, but she doesn't even acknowledge your actions at the start of Kefalonia, or I never noticed this. And to me, that's just proof that even though Cassandra has a great personality and is really well done, the dialogue that she follows didn't feel it at times. For me personally, it might be different for other people. And I think this is the whole problem of Odyssey. It's so big, so massive, it's kind of hard to interpret everything, and a lot of players do have different feelings and thoughts when it comes to the game, and I think this is what's made it the most diverse game in the history of the game series. A lot of people can praise it for the stuff it gets right, but it is overshadowed with a really long, dense map that sometimes gets overwhelming. Naval stretches that just feel too much. In Black Flag, there was always something new. There was like a dive bell, a hunting operation. You wanted to explore the islands because it looked flashy. The combat with the ship didn't feel forced. You could pick your targets. They didn't just ram into you and like, oh, hang on, now we fight. So I think Odyssey is just proof that maybe naval combat Assassin's Creed needs to be not a side feature like how it feels in Odyssey, because you've got this huge land map compared to Black Flag, where you've got huge land but a lot of emphasis on actually exploring on the boat. The last point we're going to touch on is from Kfoot, who's also part of the server. Pros: Cassandra. Love Cassandra, I love playing as her. I'm sorry I cannot pronounce the actress's name. Melis Sanfi Mahout did a fantastic job playing Cassandra. Loved exploring and wandering cities. Enjoyed the combat, allowed to incorporate a lot of different moves and abilities. Enjoyed the stealth, was able to clear a lot of forts and camps without getting detected. Allowed different approaches for stealth. Some of the side quests were great. Barnabas, salvage captain, one of his most infamous lines. Small things. Cassandra would comment when it would go from night and day, multiple finishers for all different types of weapons, multiple execution animations with the blade of Leonidas, people living lives while I was walking around cities. Cassandra would flick her hands when she came out of the water, which is stuff I never even noticed till I've gone back into it. Enjoyed exploring and listening to Greek sea shanties aboard the Adrestia. Load times were quite slow most time, which is one of the biggest cons, and blacksmiths not always having the best gear for what you need. And I think that's because Odyssey's loot system at times was too much. I struggle now, and I'm on my like 5th playthrough, and I struggle finding the best gear to use because the stats are overwhelming. So I think the last thing I'm going to discuss, because we've covered all points, but as you can see by all the comments, Assassin's Creed Odyssey has written itself in gaming history as a divisive game because it caters to a lot of people. A lot of people love big, dense, open worlds that you can explore, enjoy, get lost in. Others love great stories and little secrets you can find in the world. But then you have people who think the world's too much, or the side quests are too point and collect, do this, do this. And I think that's where Odyssey has fallen short. It fails to unite the fan base. I personally think it is a great game. Some of my greatest moments, exploring new cities for the first time, hearing getting aboard the Adrestia the first time with sea shanties, Granted, I sometimes have my own personal music, so that does get missed. I really love for the first time of stepping into the shoes of Cassandra and just living my own Odyssey. It was just brilliant. But I have to give it an honest rating of a 3.5. It's a low score, I know, because it did have some great foundations, but for me, the game just feels its execution wasn't right. I would love the dialogue to feel a bit more heavy-handed, a bit more weight and truth to them. I don't understand how I get lots of notifications off the Sambot on my phone. I don't understand how I sometimes made empathetical, lying, and others different choices, but that would make Cassandra's personality empathetical, lying, and 100 other choices. It's just not fitting. I would love to see in a simpler origin style loot system. I got so confused by Odysseys, but so 3.5 will have to be the score I give it this time. I'm hoping with Valhalla they fix some of the Odyssey's execution, and I just wish Odyssey would revamp. Honestly, I just take it back to the drawing board and give us the lore and story you have there, but give us one character, Cass, because Cassandra works really well and is canon. Give us just her, take away some of the heavy-handed RPG, make the dialogue feel a bit more heavy-handed, and I bet you would have a perfect Greek Assassin's Creed game that everyone would love. I could be wrong, but this again is my own opinion. So thank you so for listening. This is the last deep dive. Thank you all for sticking with us for 11 weeks of reviews. Whew, even I'm tired after all this. Next week is a new project, as I said at the start. But keep an eye on Twitter for more options. Twitter's going to get more active soon. I've got a few ideas coming on board, but we need you. After next week's episode, we would like you to tell us what you want to hear. Tweet us, email us, join our server and shout at us if you want, but whatever you decide us to do, we'll look into it, we'll research, and we'll put in the title description of your choice, and we'll even put your name as credit for the episode. So thank you so for listening, and we'll catch you around.